the ancient world, long before the rise of global empires and industrial powers, before the echo of cannons, muskets, or steel fleets, two civilizations climbed toward destiny. Two nations, each born on opposite sides of the Mediterranean Sea, would collide in a struggle so vast, so brutal, and so total, that it would decide the future of Western civilization itself. This is the story of Rome and Carthage, a story of ambition, fear, revenge, brilliance, betrayal, and endurance. A story of generals who became legends, citizens who became soldiers, and entire societies shaped, scarred, and redefined by war. This is the clash of empires. Long before the first Roman legion ever marched across Italy, the Mediterranean was not Rome's to claim. It was a crowded world, a mosaic of islands and kingdoms, each fighting to survive. But rising above almost all others was a glittering, powerful city on the North African coast, Carthage. Born from Phoenician traders who sailed westward from the Levant, Carthage became a maritime superpower. Its people were masters of the sea. Their ships cut across the Mediterranean like blades. Their merchants created a commercial empire stretching from Spain to Sicily. Carthage traded silver, grain, textiles, ivory, gold, and exotic goods from deep within Africa. Its harbors were wonders of ancient engineering, double-layered ports with circular naval docks where warships were repaired, refitted, and launched with astonishing speed. Rome, by contrast, began humbly, a cluster of villages on the Tiber River. But while Carthage ruled the waves, Rome conquered the land. And Rome possessed one gift Carthage would underestimate again and again: an almost unbreakable, to Sparrow 40 and conquered, unstoppable capacity to endure disaster and rise stronger from it. For centuries, the two powers remained distant, linked by trade, occasionally friendly, occasionally wary, but not yet enemies. Not until the island of Sicily became the spark. Sicily, the jewel of the central Mediterranean, was the crossroads of trade and military power. Whoever held Sicily could dominate shipping routes, collect wealth, and project influence across the sea. And by the 3rd century BCE, this island, packed with Greek colonies, local tyrants, and strategic harbors, became the center of a storm. A small Sicilian conflict drew both Rome and Carthage in. Neither intended a world-shaping confrontation, but once committed, neither could back down. Pride, fear, honor, and the survival of each empire demanded victory. Thus began the First Punic War. Rome entered this war with one fatal weakness: it had no navy. Carthage, on the other hand, was the greatest naval power in the Mediterranean. Their ships were fast, disciplined, and deadly. Roman legions could not march across the sea. But Rome had a habit, one that terrified other nations. When Rome lacked something, it learned it. When Rome learned something, it mastered it. And when Rome mastered something, it reinvented it. After capturing a wrecked Carthaginian warship, Roman engineers reverse-engineered an entire fleet. To compensate for their inexperience, they built a new naval weapon, the corvus, a heavy boarding ramp that slammed onto enemy ships, turning sea battles into infantry battles. Exactly what the Romans wanted. Suddenly, Carthage's naval superiority vanished. The war dragged on for more than 20 years. Both sides suffered defeats, disasters, mutinies, storms, and staggering losses. Vast fleets sank in storms, tens of thousands drowned, treasuries shattered. It was the longest and most expensive war in ancient Mediterranean history up to that time. But in the end, Rome won. Carthage was forced to surrender Sicily, the first major Roman province outside Italy. The balance of power had shifted. Rome, once a regional Italian force, became a rising imperial state. Carthage, humiliated and angry, paid Rome's massive war indemnity. But revenge, quiet, cold, and determined, was already forming in the mind of one man: Hamilcar Barca, the legendary Carthaginian general. And the child who followed him into battle When Carthage expanded into Spain, it gained new wealth, new armies, and new ambitions. The Barca family built a semi-independent power base, an empire within an empire, preparing for a future confrontation with Rome. But the trigger would come from a minor city called Saguntum. Rome claimed it as an ally. Carthage claimed it as within their sphere. When Hannibal, now commander of Carthaginian forces in Spain, attacked the city, Rome demanded his surrender. Hannibal refused. Rome declared war. And the Second Punic War, one of the most astonishing conflicts in human history, began. What followed became legend. Hannibal did not choose the obvious route to Italy. Instead, he chose the impossible one. He marched his army from Spain, through southern France, across hostile territory. And then, in one of the greatest military feats ever attempted, he crossed the Alps. Snow, starvation, ambushes, rock slides. Hannibal lost half his army in the mountains. But those who survived emerged into Italy hardened, furious, and prepared for glory. Rome believed no sane commander would attempt such a march. Hannibal proved them wrong. At the river Trebia, he crushed a Roman army through deception and freezing conditions. At Lake Trasimene, he annihilated another by springing a massive ambush in the fog. One of the largest ambushes in military history. Rome trembled. But the worst was yet to come. In 216 BCE, on the plains of Cannae, Hannibal executed a double envelopment maneuver, so perfect that military academies still study it today. Surrounded on all sides, nearly 50,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered in a single day. Rome had suffered the greatest defeat in its entire history. Many believed Rome would surrender. Many expected it. Many advised it as the only rational choice. But Rome did not surrender. It restructured its armies. It deployed scorched earth strategies. It adopted Fabian tactics, avoiding open battles, starving Hannibal of resources, refusing to play his game. Slowly, painfully, Rome strangled Hannibal's victories. Meanwhile, in Spain and Africa, Roman generals, including a young, visionary commander named Scipio, chipped away at Carthage's strength. Scipio learned from Hannibal, studied his strategies, and eventually carried the war back to Africa. Carthage had no choice. Hannibal was recalled home, and on the fields of Zama, the two greatest commanders of their generation met in a final showdown. Hannibal, for the first time, was defeated. Rome demanded Carthage surrender its fleet, pay a crushing indemnity, and never again wage war without Roman permission. Carthage obeyed, but the peace was fragile, poisoned by mistrust and Roman paranoia. For Rome, the memory of Hannibal, the terror he brought, the humiliation he inflicted never faded. And some Roman statesmen, especially Cato the Elder, believed Carthage must be destroyed completely, or rise again. Thus began the road to the Third Punic War. By the mid-2nd century BCE, Carthage had recovered economically, but not militarily. Rome feared this prosperity, interpreting every Carthaginian success as a threat. Eventually, Rome demanded the impossible. The Carthaginians must abandon their city and move inland. To leave Carthage was to let it die. The people refused. Rome invaded. For 3 years, Carthage resisted with desperate courage, fighting street by street, rooftop by rooftop. But in 146 BCE, after brutal siege warfare, Roman forces broke through. Carthage burned. Its last defenders fought until the very end. Its remaining inhabitants were killed or enslaved. The great city, the merchant queen of the Mediterranean, was wiped from the map. Rome emerged utterly victorious. Carthage was gone, and the Mediterranean became what Rome would proudly call Mare Nostrum, our sea. The clash of empires was over, but its consequences echoed across centuries. The destruction of Carthage removed Rome's last major rival in the Western Mediterranean. It accelerated Rome's transformation from republic to empire. It reshaped trade, politics, and culture across Europe, Africa, and the Near East. And it cemented new legends. Hannibal, the genius of maneuver and audacity. Scipio, the architect of strategic endurance. and Rome itself, the iron civilization that refused to die. But this clash was more than war. It was a collision of civilizations' two visions of power, wealth, and destiny. Carthage, maritime, commercial, outward-looking. Rome, militaristic, disciplined, expansionist, both magnificent, both flawed, both determined. Only one survived. Their struggle became part of world history, studied, debated, remembered. Because in the end, the story of Rome and Carthage is not just the story of two ancient cities, but the story of how the modern world came to be. Their triumphs, their failures, their ambitions, their downfall. This was the clash of empires, a war of worlds, a battle for the future. And though Carthage was erased, its memory endures, its story lives, its legacy whispers through time. And Rome, the victor, would soon discover that empires, no matter how mighty, carry the seeds of their own destruction. But to truly understand the clash between Rome and Carthage, we must step further back, beyond the battles, beyond the politics, into the very soul of each civilization. For wars are not merely fought with weapons. They are fought with values, identity, memory, fear. And Rome and Carthage could not have been more different. Carthage was born from the Phoenicians, a seafaring people whose ships stitched the Mediterranean into a network of trade and culture. From Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos came artisans, merchants, explorers, and settlers, people who believed the sea was not a barrier, but a road. When they founded Carthage, Carthage, new city, they built it with a vision of prosperity. Its rise was not driven by conquest, but commerce. Its wealth came not from conquered lands, but from trade, innovation, and negotiation. Carthage was a city of many peoples: Africans, Iberians, Phoenicians, Numidians, Greeks, Sicilians, Sardinians, a cosmopolitan hub where languages blended and cultures exchanged. Its navy was magnificent, its harbors, masterpieces, its wealth, legendary. But Carthage carried a weakness, a deep reliance on mercenaries. Their armies were a patchwork of hired soldiers: Iberian swordsmen, Libyan spearmen, Numidian horsemen, Gallic warriors, fearsome, skilled, but in times of crisis, not always loyal. Rome, meanwhile, built something entirely different. Rome did not rise on trade. Rome rose on unity and the sword. The Roman Republic had no single king, no single merchant class, no single ethnic identity. Instead, Rome built a society around citizenship, a powerful idea rarely seen in the ancient world. To be Roman was not about blood. It was about loyalty, duty, discipline, shared destiny. Roman citizens served in the legions. They farmed the land. They voted in assemblies. They believed the Republic, despite its flaws, was worth defending with their lives. This civic loyalty made Rome terrifying, because when disaster struck, Rome did not collapse. It reformed, reorganized, and returned, again and again and again. This is why Hannibal, brilliant as he was, could not break Rome. Even after Cannae, Rome raised new armies. Even after losing tens of thousands, Rome refused to negotiate. Where other states would give up, Rome hardened. And Carthage? Carthage lacked this unity. Its leaders argued. Its oligarchs hesitated. Its territories acted independently. Hannibal fought with genius, but he fought alone. This difference, this fundamental contrast, lay at the heart of the clash. As Hannibal ravaged Italy, Rome fought a war of survival. For 16 years he roamed the peninsula, undefeated in open battle. Cities defected. Allies wavered. Roman morale shattered. But Rome adapted. The Roman Senate pushed forward measures that would have been unthinkable in peacetime. Children were conscripted. Slaves were freed to serve. Unorthodox commanders like Fabius Maximus, once mocked, rose to leadership. Rome became a fortress of resilience. Meanwhile, Hannibal, far from home, faced shortages of food, money, and reinforcements. Carthage's politicians refused to fully commit to his campaign, fearing the growing power of the Barca family. One man fought for Carthage, one government hesitated, and one republic wounded but unbroken refused to yield. While Hannibal made Italy tremble, another war unfolded in Spain. There, Rome targeted the Barcid power base. The Scipio brothers fought fiercely, and though they fell in battle, their sacrifice paved the way for young Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Scipio Africanus. Scipio was daring, charismatic, clever. He studied Hannibal's methods, learned from his maneuver warfare, and reshaped the Roman army around flexibility, speed, and psychological advantage. By striking at Spain, Scipio severed Carthage's wealth. By invading Africa, he forced Carthage's hand. The final confrontation was inevitable. At Zama, the battlefield was a symbolic mirror of the entire war. Rome, disciplined and unified. Carthage, courageous but dependent on diverse forces. Numidian cavalry, once Hannibal's advantage, had switched sides. Iberian swordsmen and Libyan infantry fought bravely but lacked coordination. Elephants charged, but Roman manipular formations absorbed and redirected them. And face to face, Scipio met Hannibal. Two minds, two legends, two visions of how the world should be. Hannibal's experience clashed with Scipio's innovation, but innovation prevailed. Carthage fell to its knees, but not yet to ruin. That final tragedy would come later. Under Roman pressure, Carthage was forbidden to wage war, forbidden to rebuild its navy, forbidden to defend itself. It became a city chained. Yet Carthage's people were industrious. They rebuilt the economy. Merchants thrived. Trade flourished. Agriculture boomed. Once again, Carthage rose not as an empire, but as a wealthy commercial powerhouse. And Rome noticed. Some Romans could not accept Carthage's recovery. To them, a prosperous Carthage was a threat, a reminder of past humiliation. Among them was Cato the Elder. Every speech he made in the Senate, regardless of the topic, ended with the same words: Carthage must be destroyed. And eventually, Rome agreed. When Carthage defended itself against Numidian aggression without Roman approval, the Republic declared war. The Third Punic War had begun. Rome sent an army expecting an easy victory. Instead, the Carthaginians fought like cornered lions. Men, women, and even children joined the defenses. They built weapons day and night. Streets became fortresses. Every house became a last stand. The siege lasted 3 violent years. Finally, under Scipio Aemilianus, the adoptive grandson of Scipio Africanus, Rome breached the walls. What followed was slow, brutal destruction. Building by building, street by street, the last defenders retreated to the Barca, Carthage's citadel, where they made their final stand. When the city fell, the flames burned for days. Carthage was erased, its harbor filled in, its surviving population enslaved, its territory absorbed into the Roman Republic. Thus ended Carthage, the only power that had ever truly threatened Rome. But victory carried a shadow. Rome emerged supreme, but also transformed. The constant warfare had enriched the elite, weakened the Republic's institutions, and created vast inequalities. Veterans returned to find their farms gone, wealth concentrated in the hands of a few. The old Republican virtues eroded, ambition grew, violence escalated, civil wars erupted. In the ashes of Carthage, Rome unknowingly planted the seeds of its own decline. Hannibal once warned that victory can be as dangerous as defeat. Rome would learn this lesson slowly, painfully, over the centuries to come. Yet the story of Rome and Carthage, this colossal duel of civilizations, still echoes today. In military academies, the tactics of Trebia, Trasimene, Cannae, and Zama are dissected. In museums, Carthaginian and Roman artifacts sit side by side, silent witnesses to a war that shaped continents. In the foundations of European, African, and Middle Eastern history, the consequences of their struggle remain embedded. The Mediterranean world was forever changed. Trade routes shifted, cultures blended, languages spread, new powers emerged. Molded by the shockwaves of the Punic Wars, Rome gained an empire, but also a destiny it could not escape. Carthage lost everything, but gained immortality in memory, because sometimes civilizations die, but their stories never do. And so we conclude the epic struggle, a tale of ambition and survival, of genius and failure, of two cities, two peoples, and two visions of the world. Rome versus Carthage, steel versus sea, legion versus elephant, republic versus republic, a conflict so vast it spanned generations, so brutal it scarred nations, so decisive it shaped the future of the Western world. This was the clash of empires. This was the war that built history. And though Rome prevailed, the ghost of Carthage still whispers on the Mediterranean wind. But even after Carthage fell, the echoes of the Punic Wars did not fade. For history is not a single moment, it is a chain reaction. And the clash between Rome and Carthage set off ripples that traveled far beyond the shores of the Mediterranean. To understand the full weight of their conflict, we must look at what came after. Tapper. Rome stood victorious, yet victory came with a cost few understood at the time. The Roman Republic had been built on a balance between ordinary citizens and the elites, a delicate system of shared power, strict laws, and civic duty. During the Punic Wars, that balance shifted, temporarily at first, then permanently. The massive influx of wealth from conquered territories flooded into the hands of Rome's aristocracy. Senators acquired vast estates, swallowing up the small family farms that had once formed the backbone of Rome's army. Ordinary citizens, unable to compete, moved into the growing capital, swelling its population, but not its prosperity. Rome changed. Its political class changed, and its values changed. The virtues of simplicity, humility, service, and moderation, once the pride of the Republic, began to erode. The Roman elite spoke of honor, but chased profit. They spoke of duty, but sought power. They spoke of protecting freedom, even as they undermined it. This transformation was not sudden. It was slow, steady, invisible. A shift beneath the surface, like tectonic plates moving silently before the earthquake. The destruction of Carthage had removed Rome's greatest external threat, but it had also removed the one force that kept Rome united. With no Carthage, Rome turned against itself. The veterans of the Punic Wars returned home expecting gratitude. Instead, they found their land repossessed. Discontent grew, frustration sharpened, the foundations of the Republic trembled. It was in this climate that figures like Tiberius Gracchus emerged, men who saw the imbalance, the suffering, the injustice. He proposed reforms to redistribute land, restore opportunity, revive Rome's citizen farmer class. But the Senate, swollen with greed and fear, rejected him violently. The first political murder in Roman history shattered the illusion of republican unity. One by one, the dominoes fell. Gaius Gracchus, Marius and Sulla, Pompey and Caesar, Antony and Octavian. Civil war became a recurring tragedy. Generals marched on Rome. Legions fought legions. The Republic, once the symbol of shared civic identity, tore itself apart. And yet, beneath every conflict lay the same shadow. The moment Rome destroyed Carthage. For when Rome no longer feared external enemies, internal ambitions ran wild. And what of Carthage's people? Their city had been destroyed, but they were not erased. Many were absorbed into Roman Africa. Some adapted, building new lives under Roman rule. Others preserved fragments of Phoenician religion, language, and culture, quiet embers of a once great civilization. Over time, Carthage itself was rebuilt by Rome, not as a rival, but as a Roman city. Temples rose. Aqueducts stretched across the land. Markets thrived again. Its harbors, once symbols of maritime power, were restored as commercial hubs. By the early centuries of the Roman Empire, Carthage became one of the richest and most vibrant cities in Roman Africa, second only to Alexandria in the entire Mediterranean. Ironically, Rome rebuilt what it once destroyed. The ashes of Carthage became fertile ground for Roman prosperity. History, in its strange symmetry, had turned a mortal enemy into a jewel of the empire. But if the Punic Wars shaped the political future of Rome, they also transformed warfare itself. Military historians often describe this era as a turning point, the moment discipline, logistics, engineering, and strategy determined the fate of nations more than individual heroism. Rome mastered the art of supply lines, the science of fortifications, the discipline of formations, the adaptability of tactics, the infrastructure of conquest. Meanwhile, Hannibal's innovations changed armies forever. His use of multi-ethnic forces in coordinated roles, his deep understanding of terrain, his psychological warfare, his flexible command style, these became foundations of later military theory. From Napoleon to modern battlefield doctrine, even today, armies study Cannae not as ancient history, but as a living lesson. Hannibal's tactics continue to influence war colleges, strategy seminars. His defeat did not diminish his brilliance. It magnified it. Rome conquered him, but never surpassed him. Yet beyond strategy and politics, the clash between Rome and Carthage touched something deeper. It revealed how civilizations rise and how they fall. Carthage showed that wealth alone cannot protect a nation without unity. Rome showed that determination can overcome even the greatest disasters, but that victory can sow the seeds of decline. Both societies reached staggering heights. Both experienced glory and suffering. Both left legacies that stretch across continents and centuries. But Rome wrote the final chapter, and so their story became part of ours. For when we trace the history of Europe, North Africa, and the Mediterranean, when we study the roots of Roman law, architecture, we find echoes of Carthage in every Roman innovation. We find Punic languages intertwined with Latin. We find Carthaginian agricultural practices adopted in Roman farming manuals. We find Phoenician influence in Mediterranean shipbuilding, religion, and countless cultural traditions. The clash between Rome and Carthage was not just a war. It was a transmission of ideas, a merging of worlds, a brutal exchange that reshaped civilization. It is a reminder that even in destruction, remnants survive. Even in defeat, influence endures. Carthage died, but Carthaginian ideas lived on. Rome won, but Roman greatness came with a heavy price, and history remembers them both. For thousands of years, storytellers, scholars, generals, and emperors have returned to this conflict, seeking lessons about ambition, strategy, endurance, and fate, because at its core, the story of Rome versus Carthage is a story of humanity. Its capacity for brilliance, its capacity for cruelty, its longing for power, its fear of decline, its resilience, its fragility. Two civilizations, two destinies, one collision, and the world was never the same. To understand the true gravity of the clash between Rome and Carthage, we must step inside the worlds they built, to see what each society valued, feared, worshipped, and dreamed of. Because war is not only fought by armies, it is fought by cultures, and the cultures of Rome and Carthage could not have been more different. Carthage was a city of the sea born from maritime explorers, shaped by trade winds in distant horizons. Its wealth came from movement, negotiation, discovery. The sound of its identity was not steel on shield, but the creaking of ship masts and the hum of marketplaces. In Carthage, merchants were heroes, navigators were pioneers, explorers were legends. Their ships traveled beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic, reaching as far as West Africa and possibly even Britain. They brought back metals, dyes, exotic animals, and stories from beyond the known world. The Carthaginian religion reflected this worldview. Their gods were connected to nature, harvests, storms, and the balance of commerce. Baal Hammon, the divine protector; Tanit, the celestial mother; Melkart, the patron god of Tyre, adopted into Carthaginian power. Their rituals were ancient, inherited from the Phoenician world, a blend of devotion, tradition, and mystery. Carthage looked outward, across the sea, toward opportunity. Rome looked inward, toward discipline, stability, and the land. Roman identity was forged not in harbors, but in farms, not in markets, but in fields. To the Romans, the farmer soldier was the ideal citizen, hard-working, loyal, disciplined, rooted in the soil of Italy. The Roman pantheon reflected their values. Jupiter, god of law and order. Mars, the guardian of war and agriculture. Vesta, protector of the hearth and family. They worshipped duty as much as divinity. Roman virtue virtus was not about wealth or travel. It was about service, sacrifice, and honor. Rome feared luxury, feared softness, feared the corruption that often followed prosperity. And so when Rome looked across the sea and saw Carthage, rich, cosmopolitan, flourishing without the same military focus, they perceived not simply a rival, but a threat to their way of life. Rome believed Carthage represented something dangerous, a different path to power, a different path to greatness, one based on wealth, not warfare, trade, not conquest, negotiation, not discipline. To the Romans, this difference was unsettling, perhaps even intolerable. These contrasting worldviews shaped diplomacy long before swords were drawn. For decades, Rome and Carthage coexisted through complex treaties, agreements about trade rights, territorial boundaries, and spheres of influence. But beneath the surface of every treaty was suspicion. Rome feared Carthaginian naval dominance. Carthage feared Roman territorial aggression. Each saw the other not just as a competitor, but as an alternate vision of civilization. The conflict, then, was not accidental. It was inevitable. Two worlds cannot share the same horizon forever, not when they are rising, expanding, and shaping regions in their own image. When Rome began to expand beyond Italy and Carthage extended its influence into Sicily and Spain, they were bound to collide. The wars that followed were not merely conflicts of armies, but competitions of identity. And when the wars ended, when Rome stood alone, the consequences reshaped culture as much as politics. With Carthage destroyed, the Mediterranean became heavily Romanized. Latin spread westward. Roman law replaced local traditions. Roman architecture dominated cities. Roman political systems were enforced from Africa to Gaul. But not everything Carthaginian disappeared. Punic cults persisted in rural areas. Carthaginian languages influenced regional dialects. Carthaginian agricultural techniques, especially those described in the agricultural treatises of Mago, became foundational texts in Roman farming. Rome, the conqueror. In this way, Carthage did not vanish. It blended. It merged. It whispered its culture into Roman identity. No civilization, no matter how crushed, ever truly disappears. But while cultures blended, memories sharpened. For Rome, the Punic Wars became a defining myth, the story of a small, resilient republic that overcame catastrophe. Generations of Romans grew up hearing tales of Hannibal at the gates, the sacrifices of their ancestors, the burning of Carthage, and the hard-won triumph that made Rome supreme. These stories justified expansion, justified conquest, justified empire. Look what we endured, they said. Look what we overcame. We survived Hannibal. We can survive anything. This mentality fueled Roman ambition for centuries. And yet, the memory of Hannibal terrified Rome long after his death. Parents warned their children at night. Hannibal is at the gates. Roman historians wrote about him with respect, admiration, and fear. For Rome had faced many enemies, but none like Hannibal. He became a symbol of foreign brilliance, a reminder that even the mightiest republic can be shaken to its core by one genius with an army and a vision. Rome destroyed Carthage, but Hannibal? Hannibal became eternal. His name survived not because Rome erased him, but because Rome could not forget him. And in that irony lies one of history's quiet truths. Sometimes the conqueror remembers the conquered more vividly than the conquered remember themselves. As centuries passed, Rome transformed into an empire under Augustus, expanded under Trajan, struggled under Marcus Aurelius, fractured under Diocletian, and evolved under Constantine. And always, in the background of Roman history, lay the ghost of the Punic Wars. The lessons learned, the fears inherited, the strategies adopted, the arrogance cultivated. The scars carried. Rome never again faced a rival so evenly matched. Not until the very end, when new powers rose beyond its borders. But by then, the old republic, the Rome that fought Carthage, was long gone. The clash of Rome and Carthage was not simply a conflict of empires. It was a turning point in the human story. A moment when the world could have followed two very different paths. And though Rome prevailed, the legacy of their rivalry remains one of the most extraordinary sagas in ancient history. A story that continues to captivate, inspire, and warn. For the tale of Rome and Carthage is not just a record of past events. It is a mirror, reflecting the rise and fall of powers, the dangers of ambition, the cost of victory, and the fragility of civilization. This was more than a war. It was a crossroads in time, and the world that emerged from it is the world we inherited. And so the war that had begun as a clash for influence in Sicily expanded far beyond the imagination of either power. For Rome, it became a test of endurance, an opportunity to prove that their republic could survive any hardship. For Carthage, it became an existential struggle not merely to win, but to avoid being strangled by a rising competitor that refused to be defeated. Across Italy, recruitment intensified. Roman boys barely old enough to hold a shield were pressed into training, learning to march, learning to fight, learning that citizenship demanded sacrifice. Carthage responded in kind, summoning African levies, Iberian warriors, and mercenaries from as far as Gaul and Numidia. What Rome lacked in experience, Carthage compensated for with professional soldiers hardened by decades of foreign campaigns. And in this turbulent era, something remarkable happened. Rome, a land power, began building fleets. Shipwrights worked day and night, copying captured Carthaginian designs plank by plank. The Corvus boarding bridge, a brutal, inelegant invention, allowed Roman infantry to turn sea battles into land battles. And for a moment, against all odds, this tactic worked. Carthaginian sailors, used to elegant maneuver warfare, suddenly found themselves facing Roman legions on floating platforms of death. But Rome's victories came at a terrible cost. Tempests smashed entire fleets. Tens of thousands drowned. Debts mounted. Grain shipments failed. And yet, the Roman Senate refused to surrender. Carthage, equally weary, saw its treasury strained by mercenary wages, distant garrisons, and the delicate balance of maintaining political harmony among its own elite families. Then came the Barcid dynasty, led by Hamilcar Barca, a commander who understood that Carthage needed a new strategy. He turned to Iberia. There, along the rich coasts and mineral-laden hills of Spain, he forged a new empire, one built not by Carthaginian merchants, but by Carthaginian steel. Tribal chiefs became allies or enemies. Cities either pledged loyalty or were crushed. Step by step, Hamilcar built a war machine Carthage had never possessed before. When he died, his son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair continued the work, expanding alliances through negotiation and shrewd diplomacy. And when Hasdrubal was assassinated, the torch passed to Hamilcar's young son, a boy raised on campaign, shaped by battle, and sworn from childhood to a vow that would change the world. Hannibal Barca. He was not merely a commander. He was a symbol of Carthage's defiance. Brilliant, daring, and determined to avenge his father's struggles against Rome. And while Carthage did not officially seek another war, Hannibal understood that conflict was inevitable. Rome watched Iberia with growing alarm. Carthage watched Rome expand with growing fear. The Ebro River Treaty was fragile, and the city of Saguntum, seeking Rome's protection, became the spark. When Hannibal besieged Saguntum, Rome demanded his surrender. Hannibal's march is still whispered about centuries later. A multicultural army of Africans, Iberians, Gauls, Numidians, and Carthaginians trekking across the Pyrenees, battling hostile tribes in southern Gaul, and then facing the impossible challenge of the Alps. Supplies dwindled, horses slipped into bottomless ravines. Yet still they pressed forward, driven by loyalty, fear, ambition, and Hannibal's unshakable charisma. When they descended into Italy, battered but alive, Rome was shocked. They had expected to fight in Iberia or Africa, not at their own doorstep. But Rome still believed the invasion could be contained. They had numbers. They had discipline. They had the home advantage. But Hannibal had genius. At the Ticinus River, at Trebia, and at Lake Trasimene, he delivered blows so devastating that Roman morale wavered. Consuls fell. Legions disappeared. Panic swept the city. Refugees flooded through the gates. And yet Rome refused to negotiate. The Senate declared a strategic emergency. Dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus took command, avoiding pitched battles, burning crops, and shadowing Hannibal's army from a distance. It was a strategy of delay, of patience, of survival. But not all Romans agreed. Many felt that delaying was cowardice. And so, at Cannae, Rome mobilized one of the largest armies in its history, determined to crush Hannibal once and for all. Instead, Hannibal crushed them. In a display of tactical mastery still studied today, he executed the perfect double envelopment, surrounding and annihilating a massive Roman force. Tens of thousands died. It was Rome's darkest hour. Allies defected. Italy, fractured. For a moment, the fate of the Republic hung by a thread. But Hannibal, despite the victory, lacked reinforcements. Political rivalries in Carthage undercut the Barcid faction. Hannibal was left stranded deep in enemy territory, brilliant, yet unsupported. Rome adapted. New commanders rose. Scipio Africanus fought in Iberia with relentless energy, dismantling Carthage's power base. Siege after siege, battle after battle. He cut Carthage's supply lines and shattered its alliances. Hannibal, still undefeated in Italy, could do little to help. Eventually, Rome carried the war to North Africa. Carthage, cornered and desperate, recalled Hannibal to defend the homeland. He left Italy with sorrow, knowing the war there could never be won without support, but also knowing Carthage would fall without him. In the plains of Zama, the two greatest commanders of the age, Hannibal and Scipio, finally met face to face. The battle was brutal, decisive, and tragic. Rome emerged victorious. Carthage was forced into submission. Hannibal entered exile. And Rome, now the dominant power, viewed Carthage as a threat even in defeat. Years later, despite Carthage honoring every treaty, despite its attempts to rebuild peacefully, Roman statesman Cato the Elder ended every speech, no matter the topic, with the same chilling phrase, "But I think Carthage must be destroyed." Eventually, Rome acted on that belief. The Third Punic War was less a conflict and more a final act of vengeance. Roman generals demanded impossible concessions, then besieged the city when Carthage refused. For 3 years, Carthage resisted, starving, desperate, surrounded by fire and steel. Citizens tore down their own houses to build defenses. Women braided their hair into bowstrings. Children carried stones. It was a final, tragic stand. When Rome broke through, the city burned for days. Carthage was erased from the map, and so, after more than a century of struggle, the clash of empires ended. Rome stood alone as the master of the Western Mediterranean. Carthage survived only in memory, in stories, in legends, in the ghosts of a lost world. Yet the legacy of their conflict shaped everything that followed. Rome's expansion into Africa, its dominance over the Mediterranean, the rise of emperors, the birth of Western civilization's foundations, and buried beneath it all lies the memory of two cities, one built on military discipline, the other on maritime wealth, whose rivalry changed the course of history. Their clash reminds us that empires rise not from fate, but from choices. That power brings both ambition and fear. That the world's greatest struggles are never simple and never forgotten. And though Carthage was destroyed, its name echoes still. Its story stands as a testament to resilience, innovation, and the relentless drive of human civilizations to outlast one another. Rome won the war, but history never forgets the price. But even in victory, Rome struggled to understand what it had become. The destruction of Carthage did not bring peace. It opened the door to an age of unprecedented ambition. Rome controlled the western Mediterranean. Yet the habits learned during the Punic Wars, the constant mobilization, the political rivalry, the appetite for expansion, could not be unlearned. The Republic had reshaped itself to defeat Hannibal, and in doing so, created forces it could no longer fully control. Veterans returned home to find their farms neglected, swallowed by debts or purchased by the wealthy elite. Estates grew, smallholders declined. The legions had protected Rome abroad, but their absence weakened Rome at home. Carthage's ashes may have cooled, but the fires within Roman society were just beginning to burn. As Rome expanded into Greece, into Africa, into Hispania, it inherited new cultures, new wealth, and new enemies. The Senate, once a council of equals, became a battlefield of ego and ambition. Generals who had witnessed Hannibal's brilliance sought glory of their own. Young men studied Scipio Africanus and dreamed not of serving the Republic but of outshining it. In this era of transformation, the seeds were planted for future civil wars, wars that traced their origins directly to the rise and fall of Carthage. For Carthage's destruction created a vacuum. Trade routes that once carried Punic ships now carried Roman fleets. Wealth that once flowed into Carthage now enriched Roman merchants. Even the North African countryside, once a symbol of Carthaginian prosperity, became a Roman breadbasket. Colonists replaced citizens. Latin replaced Punic. And yet, under the soil, beneath every new structure, lay the foundations of a world Carthage built long before Rome ever dreamed of empire. But memory is stubborn. Carthage lived on in the stories of its survivors, in the traditions preserved by North African peoples, and in the writings of Greek historians who viewed Rome's final act with a mixture of awe and horror. To them, Carthage had been a rival worthy of respect, its commerce unmatched, its naval power fearsome. Hannibal, despite being Rome's greatest enemy, became a figure admired even by Romans for his resolve, his courage, and his unmatched tactical brilliance. And as centuries passed, Rome found itself haunted by the man it could never truly defeat. Hannibal's campaigns became lessons in war academies. His strategies shaped the thinking of generals, from Napoleon to Eisenhower. The man who marched elephants across the Alps had left an imprint deeper than any battlefield could hold. Rome, for all its glory, ultimately faced the same fate as Carthage. The empire it built became too vast, too complex, too divided. Power centralized. Armies became private tools of ambitious men. Civil wars erupted from Marius and Sulla to Caesar and Pompey, each echoing the imbalance created when Rome transformed from a city-state into a superpower. And as emperors rose and fell, as Rome fought on the Rhine, in Judea, in Syria, in Britannia, few remembered that its path to dominance began with a single rivalry. Two cities that once shared trade routes, ambitions, and dreams, now locked forever in the memory of history. Yet, in the quiet moments, when Roman historians reflected on their past, they often returned to the same conclusion. Had Hannibal received reinforcements, had Carthage supported him more decisively, the world might have been very different. Latin might not have become the mother of Romance languages. European law might not have followed Roman models. Christianity, born within the Roman world, might have spread along different roads or not at all. History, in its vast sweep, often hinges on moments of hesitation. A delayed message, a divided council, a single battle, fought on a different day. And so the clash between Rome and Carthage becomes more than a story of empires. It becomes a reminder of how fragile destiny truly is. Imagine the world Hannibal envisioned, Carthage thriving, Rome contained, the Mediterranean balanced between two powers. Imagine Carthaginian trade dominating the Atlantic. Imagine Punic explorers mapping coasts unknown to Europe. Imagine a world where the cultural centers of power lay not in Rome, Paris, or London, but in North Africa, a world shaped by merchants and sailors instead of legions. Such a world never came to pass. Rome's victory ensured it. But the dream, the possibility of an alternate ancient history, remains a testament to how narrow the margins were, how close Carthage came to reshaping the world. As the Roman Empire entered its golden age, with marble temples and sprawling roads, with emperors whose names would echo through time, it carried within its grandeur the silent legacy of its destroyed rival. Every triumphal arch celebrating victory over Africa, every mosaic depicting Hannibal's defeat, every speech praising Roman discipline was built atop the memory of the city Rome feared for generations. But memories do not die. Archaeologists have uncovered Carthage's harbor structures, ingenious circular docks that reveal a naval power carefully engineered for dominance. Ruins of Punic homes, burial chambers, and marketplaces speak of a complex, thriving civilization. Statues, inscriptions, votive offerings, they all tell the same story. Carthage was more than Rome's enemy. It was a world unto itself. And though Rome ensured Carthage would never rise again, it could not erase the truth that its own greatness was forged in the fires lit by Carthaginian resistance. The clash of empires, Rome and Carthage, was not merely a struggle for territory. It was a battle of identities, a contest between two different visions of civilization, one powered by agriculture, citizenship, and military discipline, the other driven by commerce, navigation, and a global network of trade. Both sought security. Both feared domination. Both believed their survival depended on the fall of the other. In the end, Carthage fell. Rome rose. But history tells a deeper, more nuanced tale. Carthage, in its defeat, pushed Rome to become something greater and something more dangerous. Rome, in its victory, inherited not just land, but the responsibility and burden of ruling a world it never expected to control. And long after Rome itself fell, long after its legions disappeared, its empire fractured, and its cities crumbled, stories of the Punic Wars remained. Not because they were wars of conquest, but because they were wars that defined the ancient world. Today, when we speak of strategy, leadership, and resilience, we still speak the language of Hannibal and Scipio. When we study the rise and fall of powers, we return to Rome and Carthage. Their rivalry is timeless, not because of who won, but because of what it reveals. The fragile balance between ambition and survival, the cost of greatness, and the enduring truth that empires are built by human hands and undone by them. This is the legacy of their clash. A legacy etched into the fabric of history, reminding us that even the mightiest cities can fall, and even the defeated can shape the world in ways victory never could. And so, as the ancient world marched forward, the shadow of the Punic conflict lingered like a ghost that refused to fade. Generations after the fires of Carthage were extinguished, Roman children still learned of Hannibal's march, still felt the chill when elders whispered, "Hannibal is at the gates." It became more than a warning. It became a cultural memory, an imprint of fear so deep that it shaped policies long after the threat itself had vanished. Roman writers, proud yet introspective, tried to understand the magnitude of what had transpired. Polybius, living as both observer and participant, wrote that Rome's victory over Carthage was not inevitable, but earned through a relentless, almost unnatural will to survive. Livy, centuries later, retold the tales with a mixture of admiration and sorrow, as though sensing that in destroying Carthage, Rome had set itself on a path toward its own eventual unraveling. For the Romans who lived through those years, the war was not just a contest of arms, it was a trial of identity. They had endured defeats no other republic could survive. Armies annihilated, consuls slain, allies wavering. And yet they rebuilt. They returned to the battlefield again and again, as though driven by destiny or by fear of being remembered as the generation that let Rome fall. But if Rome's tenacity was unmatched, Carthage's resilience was equally remarkable. Few cities could endure the loss of armies on foreign soil, the collapse of alliances, the financial strain of mercenary uprisings, and still continue to fight. Few commanders could lead a battered, multinational army across continents and still inspire loyalty. Hannibal's men followed him, not because they feared him, but because they believed in him. They believed he could do the impossible. It is tempting to see the Punic Wars as a simple narrative of Roman rise and Carthaginian fall. But the truth is richer, more complex. Carthage was not a mere obstacle to Roman power, it was a catalyst, a rival that forced Rome to transform, adapt, and evolve. Without Carthage, Rome might have remained a regional power. Without Hannibal, Rome's generals might have lacked the model against which they measured greatness. Without the challenge of the Punic world, the Roman Republic might never have become the Roman Empire. History remembers Carthage as the defeated. Yet it was Carthage that sparked Rome's golden age. It was Carthage that taught Rome to build fleets, to master the seas, to innovate in logistics and engineering. It was Carthage that taught Rome the cost of complacency. And it was Carthage that supplied Rome with a legend so powerful that even Rome's enemies centuries later, Visigoths, Vandals, Persians, studied Hannibal's strategies, hoping to replicate the methods of the man Rome feared most. But even outside the battlefield, the Carthaginians left a legacy the Romans could not erase. Punic agriculture, highly advanced and deeply studied, was adopted by Roman farmers. Carthaginian ship construction influenced Roman naval design. Carthaginian trade routes became Roman trade routes. In commerce, architecture, religion, and even language, faint traces of Carthage persisted, hidden but never gone. And across the Mediterranean, in quiet villages along the North African coast, traditions survived songs, rituals, crafts, and stories that echoed memories of a world that Rome tried to bury. Carthage was destroyed, but it was not forgotten by the people who lived nearest to its ruins. In Rome itself, victorious orators praised the greatness of the Republic. Yet some philosophers wondered silently whether the destruction of Carthage had marked the beginning of Rome's moral decline. With no powerful rival to check its expansion, Rome grew outward but hollowed inward. Wealth poured into the city, reshaping its society. Slaves from conquered lands filled its markets. Senators grew richer. Inequality widened. The political balance that once sustained the Republic shifted, slowly, imperceptibly, toward instability. And so, in a twist of history's irony, Rome's greatest victory may have also been its first internal wound. Without Carthage, Rome had no rival to remind it of struggle, no equal to temper its ambition. What remained was a republic marching unstoppably toward empire, toward Caesar, toward civil war, toward emperors who would rule by decree. Yet for all its flaws, Rome endured for centuries. Its laws influenced nations yet to be born. Its roads connected distant worlds. Its culture shaped the foundations of Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. The memory of Carthage lingered as the moment when Rome first asserted its destiny. And so the tale of their clash becomes not just a story of war, but a story of the ancient world learning what power meant, how it was earned, how it was lost, and how its consequences ripple through time. The Punic Wars remind us of the delicate balance between strength and overreach, between victory and vulnerability. And though Rome ultimately stood on the smoking ruins of its rival, neither city walked away unchanged. The other through triumph that demanded a price. Centuries later, when Arab conquerors reached the North African coast, they found the ruins of Carthage still standing, silent stone remnants staring out at the sea that had once carried Punic sails. They rebuilt there, as had the Romans before them, each civilization leaving another layer of history on top of the last. And in modern times, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of Carthage's mighty harbor, marveling at the ingenuity of its engineers. They have excavated temples, workshops, and homes, piecing together the life of a vibrant city that had once dominated the Western Mediterranean. Through each discovery, the ancient world speaks again, reminding us that Carthage was not merely a victim of Rome, but a titan in its own right. Rome and Carthage, two powers destined to collide, their rivalry stretching across generations, shaping the entire course of Mediterranean history. Their story is not merely about who won or lost, but about the world they created through their struggle, the world that shaped the civilizations to come. And though Rome's victory resounds through time, the echo of Carthage, its people, its leaders, its spirit continues to remind us that even in defeat, A civilization can leave an imprint deeper and more enduring than its conquerors ever imagined. And so, as we step back from the long and turbulent centuries that shaped the ancient Mediterranean, one truth becomes clear. The rivalry between Rome and Carthage was more than a contest of military might. It was a clash of worlds, a collision of identities, a battle between two visions of civilization that forever altered the course of human history. Rome, forged in the crucible of repeated defeat, rose not because it was destined to, but because it refused to surrender. Carthage, wealthy, sophisticated, and far-reaching, pushed Rome to its limits and revealed the extraordinary lengths a republic could go to survive. Their conflict transformed farmers into sailors, merchants into soldiers, cities into empires. It reshaped trade routes, redrew borders, and rewrote the future. Even now, thousands of years later, the ghosts of that struggle whisper through the ruins of their cities, in the strategies taught in modern military academies, and in the very languages and institutions that shape our world today. Hannibal's audacity, Scipio's discipline, Rome's endurance, Carthage's innovation. These are the threads that continue to influence how we understand leadership, conflict, and the rise and fall of nations. The story of Rome versus Carthage is a reminder that power is fragile, that ambition has a cost, and that even the mightiest civilizations can be humbled by the passage of time. No empire stands forever, but the lessons they leave behind endure. And as the dust of history settles and the echoes of marching legions fade, what remains is not the triumph of one city or the destruction of another, but the timeless reminder that human history is shaped by courage, struggle, and the unending drive to build something greater than ourselves. If this journey into the ancient world moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes to a chapter of history often remembered only for its wars, then join us. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into our past stories of forgotten empires, legendary leaders, and the turning points that shaped humanity. Hit the like button, share this documentary with others who love history, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new release. Thank you for watching. And until next time, remember, history is not just a record of what once happened. It is the story of who we are.